Anderson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Cass Allen over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, LAFB fans? Will Decker, your host from the Bruin Bible, and draft is in session. We are here to talk about Bet Online and the good people behind the brand. Football season is officially back, and Bet Online remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player needs, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code LAFB to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts. What is up, and welcome to the latest edition of the Bruin Bible. And we have a friend of the show on. I think he's making his hat trick appearance, dating all the way back to last year. One of my favorite people to connect with on college football, my main man out in Utah. Who better to talk the Utah-UCLA game with than Bryan Brown? Bryan, what is going on, my brother?
It's my favorite time of year, specifically Utah versus UCLA, because I know I get to look forward to talking to you. We always have a good time, and I'm actually really excited / nervous for this game because, as someone who follows the Pac-12 pretty avidly, I know how good this Bruin squad is. And, I think everybody finally realized that DTR has hit that level with his, I don't even know what you're calling it, the magic eraser that he had against Washington, where he just basically erased two defenders and then waltzed in the end zone. But, just thank you so much for having me, and excited to be here and talk some ball.
An absolute living legend. If you're not already doing so, follow our guy Bryan Brown on Twitter. The DTR play you mentioned, dude, I'm watching at home. I'm pretty calm and composed. I'm just like firing off tweets. That and the Bobo touchdown on a Friday night, I think the whole apartment complex kind of heard me going down because I was losing my shit out there. Love the Bruins. Love that we're competitive again. These are two top 25 teams going at it, Bryan. And we just kind of want to get your lowdown because there's a lot going on in the Utes program. This was a team that last year really flipped the switch with the quarterback you guys have in Cam Rising, who we will get to in a little bit. But I want to start off with a two-part question with you specifically, Bryan. Being from Utah, is it just in the blood, in the culture, just to become a Utes fan, especially around the Salt Lake City area?
Well, it is now. So when I was growing up, it was all about the team down south and BYU, and Salt Lake City has definitely become home of the Utes. In fact, when you come in from the airport and get off the freeway, there's a big giant warehouse that has a very beautiful mural painted on it, and this city, especially on Saturdays, it paints itself red, and it's great, because this is a program that's really built and evolved into something that's growing across the college football landscape. And, there's still that rivalry there with BYU for sure. But I think a few years apart, being in different conferences going forward, it helps, people be a little more understanding. And it's a unique rivalry because the two schools are only 40 minutes apart. You compete in state for recruits all the time. And it's just, there's a lot of, I don't want to say incest necessarily, but Kyle Whittingham, graduate of BYU, goes up to Utah. He's almost 20 years now up on the hill as the Utah head coach. And you see the legacy that he's created. And now one of his proteges, Kalani Sitake, the head coach at BYU. And so the cycle just keeps moving like that. So it's a unique place, I think, in that regards, where you have two, I'm not going to say like stalwarts in the college football landscape, but two teams that are really starting to reestablish themselves, and it seems like college football's hierarchy has changed a lot in the last few years. I think UCLA is a program that when I look at it, I think, I remember the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar years, J.J. Stokes, watching those guys, in the way back days. So I remember that program when it was a juggernaut to me. And you've seen things just kind of shift seismically these days.
Dude, and to your credit, when you mentioned the original Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, for UCLA fans, we do love the running back Kareem. But I'm like, Brian's around my age, I think. Like, he was not around the 60s. The OG Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So yeah. I thought that was a pretty funny moment there. But, yeah, J.J. Stokes is a name you mentioned, the all-time touchdown leader in receiving, for UCLA when it comes to that stuff. Whittingham's the guy I want to start with because this guy has really been just such a stalwart for this program, dating back to even when Urban Meyer left for the Florida job. He was the guy that took over. He was Urban's defensive coordinator. He's never left. 147-71 career record. Is kind of just the face of Utah. I got to interact with him a little bit at Pac-12 Media Day. Was such an awesome dude. Could not, ask to speak to a better guy in person. What does he mean to Utah Utes fans? Because this guy, he just has it all figured out. And for my money, he's probably the most underrated coach in at least the West Coast of college football, if not for all of it.
Underrated for sure. I think he's one of the top coaches in the country. I think a lot of that is just the longevity, right? When you're able to stay in one place and really grow and nurture a program and build it really in your kind of in your mold or your persona, that really endears you with the fan base. And he had some rocky early years. I think following somebody like Urban Meyer, that's a lot, and especially the impact that Meyer had early on. But everything you said is true. Whittingham is as good a human being as you'll find in this industry. And I think, I say that because there are a lot of sketchy coaches out there. It's just kind of one of those things where the competitiveness and the drive to win can really lead guys to, sacrifice morals. And Whittingham has not done that. He's stuck by his principles and built this program from the ground up. And Utah fans, it's so funny because I don't know that they'd necessarily acknowledge it if you ask them. But when they talk football, when they talk University of Utah, it's all the same witticisms that come out, and we joke around, he's a big fan of saying in our estimation. And I feel like every single Utah fan I talk to just drops that little precursor and then just spits out all these witticisms. But they expect, hard hitting teams. They expect excellent defense, no nonsense. There's not a lot of rooms for excuse. And that's all, due to Kyle Whittingham and how he's run and built this program. And so when you ask, how do Utah fans relate to him? I think they're just counting down the days to when they can build him a statue. And I think, there's even a contingent out there that wants it right now, but he's still got a little left in the tank. And I think this is a big year for him to try and prove just, how much he's done to develop this program.
Yeah, Whittingham, 147-71 career record. Got Utes to the first Rose Bowl in program history last year. Just a lot of great flowing energy from the guy. And to kind of piggyback into the next guy we're speaking about, I spoke to Whittingham at Media Day. I got one question in with him. I actually saw him in the elevator. I said, nice, flip-flops. He was wearing those at Media Day. But the question I got to him was, what does Cam Rising mean to your team? And the answer he gave me was very profound. He had this long, detailed answer. Mm-hmm. But he finished it off going, Cam Rising is one of, if not the best leaders I've ever had at the quarterback position. And he was around for Alex Smith. Travis Wilson was a very quality quarterback. It's crazy just to hear the praise that's heaped on Rising. And when he entered the lineup last year for you guys, your season was on the rocks. You guys are 1-1 at this point. Heartbreaking loss to your arch rival, as you mentioned earlier, BYU. Rising comes in, snap of the fingers, gets you right back in against San Diego State. And granted, you don't win that game, but you come out of that game going, hey, we got a quarterback. This guy's going to take us to the promised land. And to the promised land he did, man. He got you guys to the Rose Bowl. Only one loss the rest of the season, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And ironically, he was tied for the highest PFF grade from a quarterback in the conference with our guy DTR. So this is kind of the battle of the top two quarterbacks in the 2021 season. Cam Rising, you got to give me the lowdown. 13 touchdowns, 2 picks this year. Just a guy's guy and a guy that's arguably playing better than he did last year. What's going right for Cam Rising this year?
Well, really what it is he's just playing within the system. And I think that's part of what's given to his rise. Rising is yeah, I don't want to make too much of like the Three Musketeers look, but he's very sneaky, just in terms of you can look at him and think, he is what he is. He's just, a standard average quarterback, but he does have, an elite arm. He's an incredible decision maker, and he plays with nuance when he plays the game. And I think that's something that really doesn't go as noticed until you really watch him play. And what you're starting to see now is Utah's lost Brant Keithy, probably their, if not number one, their number two target on the offense in terms of just getting him touches. You're starting to see Rising take on more responsibilities, eat some in the run game and do more of that things. And he is so versatile, and he's a much better athlete than I think most people realize. But really what you touched on is the ethos of Rising. You talk to guys on the team even before he was a starter, and it was everybody was friends with Cam. And he was that guy that even as a redshirt transferring from Texas, he was in the program. He was going to, basketball games, volleyball, whatever it was, just wanting to be a part of it. And Utah is really big on this whole family atmosphere, and he integrated into that seamlessly. And I think that's really what developed a lot of the leadership stuff. You mentioned Whittingham, and he does speak glowingly of Cam. It's really kind of unique, to hear Kyle speak like that. But I think the biggest thing you can say is Kyle's got a classic Ford long bed truck. I think it's a 60 something or other, but perfectly restored, beautiful. And he actually let Cam drive it. And he said, I'd let Cam drive my truck any day. I think there are actually Whittingham family members that have never driven that truck too. So that speaks to how much he values Cam. And really, I think this is a great matchup between he and Dorian, because Dorian is a guy who's and maybe I'm overstepping my bounds. He's had to learn the leadership side of it, right? He's had to develop, that cerebral decision-making stuff. And, I saw a clip of him with Yogi Roth the other day where he's saying that Chip and I go back and forth, and I kind of fight with him on that stuff. And, Cam is kind of the opposite, right? He's just like a sponge with everything that Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator, gives him and goes out and plays. And then you've got DTR who, has had to learn all that stuff, but the physical gifts are just incredible. So yeah. I love the matchup and the contrast between the two.
And it's incredible. I mean, you mentioned the play in the end zone where the two defenders collided. He hurdled a guy too mid-game on Friday night as well against Washington. A lot of athletic ability. And it's two veteran quarterbacks within the Pac-12 going at it on a Saturday afternoon that are ranked opponents. So it's going to be a fun duel between two quarterbacks who knows, after this year, they might be competing for Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year, maybe more statistics if they are able to keep up where they're headed on this. I'm going to kind of branch out into more of the skill position players on offense. So Tavion Thomas, I want to be easy up on him because our guy, Stephen Aglin, told us last night that Tavion, his aunt passed away. So he had the first 100-yard game of the season against Florida, looked really good, and then has kind of been slowly, taken out of the lineup a little bit, given to the fact, his family is going through some issues, which is totally fair. But you guys have Micah Bernard back there too, a very, devastating 1-2 punch in the running back room. And then on the outside, Devon Velley, that guy is a monster, dude. 3 touchdowns, close to 300 yards receiving, 20 catches. And from what I heard, this guy is a walk-on, which I had no idea about. Talk to me about, the running back room and, any other receivers outside of Devon Velley as well.
Oh, it's a deep room in the sense that there's a lot of talent, but Utah is a team that it's a no-frills offense. We'll just put it that way. And they put everything on execution. So you're going to see a lot of downhill stuff when it's Tavion running the ball, a lot of inside zone, that kind of thing. And what separates he and Bernard is Bernard has just such great vision and ability to shift. So he's kind of more of a twitchy back, with that explosiveness and that speed. And, I think most people will look at him and maybe remember the Rose Bowl where he went both ways for Utah, caught the wheel route touchdown out of the backfield early on in that day. And that's really why he's so great is that, Mekhi is a versatile, Swiss Army knife. And I hate having to use a cliche term like that, but there's not a better way to describe him. Tavion is a downhill, run it up the middle, run it up off the tackle kind of guy. And when Utah's offensive line is clicking and able to open up those holes, and he gets that second level, that's where he's most dominant. I think, for him, it's been a lot about the off the field stuff, like you mentioned. Ant passed away, and he comes from a rough background. He'd been through multiple programs. Originally started out at Cincinnati. He was a guy that had an offer to Alabama. Actually got the offer in person from Nick Saban because he is so talented physically. And so it's just the off the field stuff is really what gets in his way as much as anything. That room, you'll see Makai. He's been dinged up a little bit. So Utah's been a little bit measured in how they use him. In fact, last week against Oregon State, used Cam Rising in the run game a little bit more just to compensate. True freshman and Jalen Glover from Florida, who very explosive back, but still learning, again, those nuances of how to read things and whatnot. So there's a lot there for Utah. Lost Chris Curry for the season. That was an unfortunate thing because Curry was starting to break through. And for a team that just predicates itself on, again, tough physical football in the trenches and running the ball, when you're down a back, that it does impact things, especially with the way that they use Bernard. So, I think that's a big highlight, for Utah fans in terms of we've got to establish the run game, especially when you're going up against a back like Charbonnet and everything that he can do. And listen, I am an unabashed fan of anything Chip Kelly run scheme. And that may put me into a category with some folks, but I love what he does with the run game. And it's one of my favorite things to watch.
Oh, dude, we love that the Chip Kelly praise, man. It's another reason we want Bryan to come back as much as he can. Deep receiving room as well, as we talked about. Dalton Kincaid, Brett Keithy, unfortunately out. He was such a talent in the tight end room. So bummed as just a fan of the game that guy is not going to be available to play. Defensive side of the ball. Clark Phillips is playing as well as any corner right now in the country. 4 interceptions, had that pick 6 last weekend against Chance Nolan that kind of ignited the Utes in that game. Give me your lowdown on Clark Phillips, because from what I'm seeing from this guy's stock is rising at the cornerback position as much as any player in the country.
Well, it was a surprise when he committed to Utah and signed. In fact, it was kind of an all-in-one fell swoop. I remember when he announced his top 5 the summer before the recruiting cycle and Utah was left out. I was like, well, I guess that's that. But he is the epitome of what Utah wants in a football player. He's tough. He's a little undersized, 5'10", 5'11", depending on, what measurement system you're using, I guess. But he is a guy who's maximized every single inch of his frame, and he does that in everything he does. My first experience watching him was at spring ball, and every single rep, he was jumping in as quickly as he could to go up against Utah's best wide receivers. You mentioned Devon Vele earlier. Walk on from San Diego, served an LDS mission, came back to Utah, and has just kind of exploded on the scene. Very different players, like Clark is small and explosive and quick and does most of his work kind of at the line of scrimmage or, in anticipation, whereas Devon is a guy who, can get deep and get open, and he's 6'5", he's a big target, right? And so I think the unique part about what I see with Clark and just matching up against this UCLA team, how does Utah use him going forward? Because he did play some nickel against Oregon State, and they have some bigger corners. Zamaya Vaughn is a guy who started to really shine, and with UCLA having some big wide receivers, especially Jake Bobo is one that stands out in my mind. Utah's going to play a ton of man. I wonder if Utah doesn't try and move Clark around so that he has more of that impact, and so that you're looking for him or having to look for him, because as Oregon State found out on Saturday, you throw his direction and he's a threat to take it the other way.
And you mentioned Jake Bobo, Clark Phillips. I think that's the matchup I'm most excited for, just as a fan of, the game and players maybe moving on to the next level. Clark Phillips is a no-doubter. Bobo is kind of running on the scene a little bit more. I think he's going to get a Senior Bowl invite. And just to see those two guys go out, it's going to be like two battling Rams fighting against one another all Saturday afternoon. So I'm really pumped about that. Bryan, we talked about the defensive line actually in the preseason. We ranked our top defensive lines in the Pac-12. Van Fillinger is still doing great things. Gabe Reed, each of them have 2.5 sacks. The pass rush has been just as advertised with the Whittingham program. Whittingham, for those who don't know, he's been the head coach for so long. You forget he was a defensive guy to start. He was a defensive coach. Those are kind of the hallmark of the Whittingham teams, where he lays his hat, is those defenses. So defense has been looking great. We got to wrap up, unfortunately, because I got to get back to the office.
Mhm.
But my guy, I need some predictions for Saturday and what you think is going to transpire.
Well, I think this is a really tough game, and I think it's going to be, that contrast between can Utah's defense stop that UCLA running game. So I think it's going to be some adjustments. I think you're going to see an explosive first half. I think you're going to see some points, especially in the first half, from both sides as that goes on. But I think things will tighten up as they naturally are. Utah, I think, is been chomping at the bit for a game like this in conference where they really feel like they're going up against an opponent that challenges them. And it's no disrespect to Oregon State or Arizona State, but this is the team I think that Utah really is looking at and focused on and said, when we get to UCLA, this is when our pursuit of a Rose Bowl really starts. So, I'm expecting them to come out and really compete hard. And I think first game back in the Rose Bowl since January. That's never a bad thing, in my opinion. I love the Rose Bowl. But I think, this is a tough one for Utah. And it comes down to basically how well can you contain Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And I have my doubts about that. And I'm never going to pick against the Utes necessarily, but I think if Utah gets this one done, it'll be a tight one, So I'll go 38-35 Utah to win this one.
No, I think it's going to be a good game, too. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I got to roll the opposite direction. I got to roll with my UCLA Bruins. But, I'm hosting the Bruin Bible, man. This is what we do. Yep. I'm a homer. I'll gladly admit that. 41-35. I think it's going to be a slugfest. I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson continues to elevate that status. Zach Charbonnet running the ball. He does great things on the ground. Him and Thomas last year were jockeying for that number one overall, running back within the Pac-12. Both are going to have bright NFL futures. And if Bobo can just, get to that 70, 80-yard threshold that we've seen him get in the past few weeks, I think UCLA's offense is going to be operating at a level that we haven't really seen under Chip Kelly. This could be the most complete offense he's had. But Bryan, thank you so much for coming on, dude. We love having you. Bruin Bible, you're not going to be in LA for the game, am I right?
No, not unfortunately. As I was mentioning earlier, I have high school duties here locally now, so not able to travel to LA. I wish I could, but who knows? Maybe back in January there'll be a reason to head down that way, one way or another.
We'd love it, man. Well, to hit me up for a beer when you're down here, dude. And where can we catch your high school work?
So at KSL Sports on Twitter, you can find me on as it says here. Brown Bear SLC, usually retweet those games, but also still staying involved with Utah football. And actually this Saturday, I'll do a little thing with a company called Playback, where if you want to come in and watch a game, watch me break things down, we'll be doing that as well. So just lots of football. That's all I do these days. It's just lots of football.
My guy eats, sleeps, and drinks football all day. Bryan Brown, pleasure as always. Bruin Bible, we are officially